The summons had come on official Vahari diplomatic letterhead, which Rowan Ashby recognized from the news and had not previously expected to encounter in his personal correspondence. It was brief, formally worded, and contained no information about what the meeting was for, which he noted with the professional attention of someone who had learned that the shape of a message tells you almost as much as its content. He had been doing independent security consulting for 3 years, since leaving search and rescue with a knee that worked well enough for most things and a tolerance for bureaucracy that had reached its natural ceiling. The work suited him. It was specific, solvable, and did not require him to be anything other than good at it. He had a small office, a reputation built entirely by referral, and no particular ambition beyond the next problem and the one after that. The Vahari diplomatic residence was a converted estate on the northern edge of the city, modified to Vahari environmental specifications in ways that had generated considerable architectural commentary, and which Rowan assessed, on the walk from the gate to the entrance, purely in terms of sight lines and access points. There were 3 he would have done differently. He filed this observation and said nothing. He was shown into a formal reception room by a Vahari attaché who communicated primarily through the medium of precise, unhappy silence. The room held 6 people. 4 advisors arranged with the geometric certainty of people who had taken their positions deliberately, 1 senior aide who was making notes, and, at the center of it all, a woman who was clearly not arranged at all, but was simply present in a way that made the arrangement of everyone else around her seem like a response to her rather than a protocol they had followed. Princess Elindra of the Vahari was younger than her formal documentation suggested, and more composed than any documentation could have conveyed. Her long ears, tapering to fine points beneath dark hair worn simply, caught the room's light without appearing to seek it. She looked at Rowan with the specific attention of someone who has already made a decision and is now assessing how the decision looks in the room. "Mr. Ashby," she said, "I have selected you as my personal guard for the duration of my diplomatic residency. The term is 6 months, with a review at 3. Your briefing documentation will be provided this afternoon." Rowan looked at her. He looked at the advisors, whose collective expression communicated a quantity of professional displeasure that they were maintaining with obvious effort. "Can I ask why?" he said. "You may," she said. "I will answer after you've decided whether to accept." He considered this for a moment. "Yes," he said. She nodded, as though this confirmed something. "Because you assessed the room's sight lines when you entered," she said, and said nothing about it. The Vahari court's reservations about him were, Rowan had to admit, structurally reasonable. He was human, which meant his physiology was an unknown quantity to a security culture built around Vahari physical parameters. He carried no military designation. His certifications were search and rescue and private security, neither of which translated cleanly into the formal hierarchy of royal protection. He was, by the metrics the court used, approximately the wrong person for the posting in most of the ways that could be measured. The advisors communicated this in the careful, indirect language of people who had been instructed to be diplomatic and were finding the instructions strenuous. The senior security liaison, a Vahari officer named Kareth, whose formal bearing suggested a significant number of years doing this particular job, delivered the most comprehensive version in a private meeting on the 2nd day. He went through the objections methodically, which Rowan respected, and concluded by noting that the princess's selection, while within her prerogative, had created certain operational concerns that he hoped Rowan understood. "I understand them," Rowan said. "And," Kareth said. "And I'll do the job," Rowan said. "The concerns are yours to hold. The job is mine to do." Kareth looked at him for a moment with the expression of a man recalibrating a variable. Elindra, when she was present during these early exchanges, did not intervene. Rowan noticed this carefully. She had the authority to resolve each objection with a word and consistently chose not to. He thought about it on the 3rd evening in the small, functional room the residents had assigned him, going through the day's security assessment the way he went through all of them, methodically, and without skipping the parts that hadn't produced anything yet. She was watching how he carried being doubted. He had been doubted before. In search and rescue, by coordinators who wanted someone with different credentials. by clients who had booked him and then stood in front of him and visibly reconsidered, by terrain and weather that expressed doubt in more immediate terms. He had learned a long time ago that doubt from external sources was information, not instruction. You noted it, you understood where it came from, and you kept doing the job. He kept doing the job. He learned the residence's geography with the same attention he gave to difficult terrain, not memorizing a map, but building a felt sense of the space, its rhythms and gaps, the places where the official protocol and the actual human behavior diverged in ways that mattered. He sat in on the public-facing events and watched the crowd dynamics with the quiet focus of a man reading weather. He revised the exit protocols twice without announcing the revisions, simply updating the documentation and briefing the relevant team members in terms specific enough to be useful and brief enough to be absorbed. After 2 weeks, Kareth stopped attending the daily security briefings with the expression of a man managing an operational concern, and started attending them with the expression of a man taking notes. The harbor event was a public diplomatic reception, the kind of carefully structured occasion that looked open and was not, bounded by invitation lists and access protocols, and a security envelope that Rowan had reviewed 4 times and found adequate for the scenario it had been designed for. The scenario it encountered was different in 3 specific ways that compounded quickly. The first was a crowd volume that exceeded the projected attendance by roughly 40%, driven by a public announcement about the Vahari delegation that had gone out through a channel the event coordinators hadn't been monitoring. The second was a waterfront maintenance situation that closed the primary vehicle egress route at the same time. The crowd density made the secondary route non-viable. The third was a media contingent that had positioned itself, not maliciously, but with the particular spatial obliviousness of people focused on their own objectives, directly across the tertiary exit. Rowan had been tracking all 3 variables for 11 minutes before they converged. He moved without announcing the movement. He had already spoken to 2 members of the Vahari security detail about the crowd dynamic, in terms they had received and acted on without requiring a formal briefing structure. He knew where Elindra was at every moment, not by surveillance, but by the accumulated spatial awareness of someone who had been reading rooms for 3 weeks, and had learned the specific way she occupied one. He had identified the 4th exit route on the 2nd day, a service access that was not in the official documentation, and had verified it twice since. He had her in the secured vehicle in 4 minutes and 12 seconds from the moment he decided to move. In the vehicle she was calm, which he had expected, because he had never once seen her be anything else. She looked at him with the quality of attention he had come to recognize as her genuine register, not the formal attention of the court, but the real kind, the kind that actually arrives. "How did you decide?" she asked. "That quickly." "I've been reading every room we've been in since the first day," he said. "The harbor was just the room where something happened." She was quiet. Outside, the city moved past the vehicle's windows in its ordinary, indifferent way, entirely unaware of the thing that had been resolved within it. "Kareth said something this morning," she said, "before the event. He said that you were the most prepared person on the security detail, and that he wished he had not spent the first week being visibly skeptical. Because it had wasted time he could have used learning from you." "Kareth is good at his job," Rowan said. "Yes," she said. "So are you." He looked at the window. There was nothing in the observation to argue with, and he had long ago stopped performing modesty about things he had worked hard to be able to do. "Why did you pick me?" he asked. The real reason, not the sight lines. She was quiet for long enough that he thought she might not answer. Then she said, "Because when I reviewed your history, I found that you had never once, in 15 years of difficult work, lost someone in your care. Not to negligence, not to poor judgment, not to insufficient effort." She paused. "The court looks for impressive credentials because they want to be impressed. I looked for that because I wanted to be safe." She turned to look at him directly. "They are not always the same thing." He had nothing to say to that which would improve it, so he said nothing, and they rode back to the residence in the comfortable silence of people who have recently stopped pretending that they are simply professional acquaintances. The residency ended on a Thursday, which struck Rowan as consistent with Thursdays, unremarkable as a day, somehow always the setting for things that turned out to matter. The formal conclusion was processed with the precise, elaborate courtesy of the Vahari diplomatic apparatus. Documents were signed. Acknowledgements were exchanged. Kareth shook his hand with both of his, which Rowan had been briefed was a Vahari gesture reserved for people whose worth has been formally revised upward, and held it for long enough to make the revision unambiguous. The offer came through official channels that afternoon, a permanent posting with the Vahari diplomatic mission, structured as a long-term security consultancy with terms that he read carefully, and found to be exactly what they said they were, without the contractual ambiguities that usually indicated someone had been optimistic about something. He sat with it the way he sat with any significant assessment, quietly, practically, and without rushing toward a conclusion before he understood the terrain. Elindra found him in the small courtyard at the north end of the residence that evening. He had been there before. It had a sight line problem he had flagged on week 1 and never been able to fully resolve within the existing structure, which had bothered him more than it professionally needed to. She sat in the chair across from his with the ease of someone who has stopped performing any version of herself other than the one that is actually present. "You've read the offer," she said. "Yes. What do you want to know?" He looked at her. 3 months ago, he would have phrased the next thing as a professional question. He phrased it honestly instead, because the months had built something between them that honesty fit better than protocol. "What does it mean?" he said. "Not the contract. What does it mean?" She met his eyes with the full quality of her attention, the real kind, the kind that had been there since the first room. "It means," she said, "that a princess of the Vahari is asking a man she trusts completely whether he is willing to continue being someone she trusts completely, with all that implies, across 2 civilizations, for as long as either of them chooses." The courtyard held them in its quiet. "That's a large thing to hold," he said. "Yes," she said. "I know. I've been holding my half of it for some time." Rowan looked at the sight line problem he had never solved, the gap in the north wall that the structural constraints of the residence made unfixable by any means he had found. He had documented it. He had worked around it. He had accepted it as a limitation of the terrain and built the rest of the work around its existence. Some things, he had learned in 15 years of difficult work, you did not solve. You understood them completely and you built accordingly, and the building was better for the honesty about what it was working with. "I need one night," he said, "to think." "I know," she said. "That is why I came to you this evening instead of this afternoon.